Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast here with Jessica Bun Bun, and this is our Only Murders in the Building Season 4, Episode 7 preview. This episode is titled Valley of the Dolls,
Mhm.
which, is a more well-known movie than I think a lot of the titles this season have been. So I don't think there's going to be as much like questioning of, is this title a movie or not, as we've had the last several weeks.
Yeah, this is a movie that I haven't seen and I'm not that familiar with. You?
Yeah, I'm really not that familiar with it either. I
Oh,
mean, just the
yeah.
real talk here with everybody. I watch so much TV on a weekly basis, and I know Jess is pretty similar
Yeah.
with this too. Is just that by the time we're all done watching TV, you know what we're not usually like? Let's go watch some movies now. Let's throw something else on top of the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Have any of you guys seen Valley of the Dolls? Leave that for us in the comments if you have.
Yeah, like the big focus, at least on paper, with this particular episode is going to be you've got the trio making a getaway, but as
Hmm.
previewed in the trailer back before the start of the season, Melissa McCarthy is coming on board the show and she is playing the part of Charles's sister. And if you have seen her and pretty much anything, you know that number one, she can be hilarious. Number two, she also plays things really, really big, which means that her and Martin Short are probably going to have the greatest field day of all time in this episode.
Yeah, they absolutely are. I mean, Martin Short loves to play things big, so get ready for that.
Yeah, well, we're going to try to get into what this story could really be about because, yeah, it's got a big name guest star, but
Yep.
I don't think this episode is going to be just as simple as, oh, here's another Only Murders in the Building, throws a famous person, and there's no substance here. Like, there's going to be substance here. So hit that subscribe button so you guys don't miss anything else. We're also very, very close here to 67,000 subscribers. So help us get to that milestone. We would be so, so grateful.
We're also covering The Penguin
Mhm.
exclusively over on our Patreon with weekly video reviews over there. And it is the only place that you're able to see those. So if you're watching The Penguin,
Mhm.
you'd like to help support Matt and I further, we'll have a link for you below for our Patreon. You're able to join that and see
Yeah.
our weekly videos over there. So thank you so much to everyone who has joined.
Thank you guys so much.
Okay, let's talk about Melissa McCarthy
Yes.
because she is another big name this season. This season is easily the season that has the biggest guest cast list that the
Yeah.
show has ever had. So, do we need a really big guest name star to play Charles's sister? I'm not there yet. I love her. I
Mhm.
love her. I think she's really, really funny. And I think she could have some really good stuff with Martin Short, especially. But I'm not sure that we needed another huge guest star. It's feeling quite overwhelming.
I feel a little bit to me like they could have been better suited if they had some less famous people in a couple of other roles, except, you have to have Richard Kind. He's a treasure. Richard Kind should be in everything. But I think that if they had cast a couple of maybe lesser known people in some other roles and still kept McCarthy, I think it may not have felt as distracting. I think my biggest concern going into this is, of course, the idea that Melissa McCarthy is so famous and has such a very
Yes.
clear style in which of how she plays things that it's going to be distracting from what the actual case is and what's actually going on here because Charles, Mabel, and Oliver are basically running for their lives entering this episode.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to get goofy. I mean, let's
Yeah,
all just put on our hard hats for
yeah.
that. It's going to get goofy with them all together. And it's why, as much as I really love her, and I hope that it works out where I'm not distracted seeing her being like, oh, it's Melissa. All
Yeah,
right, let's go, Melissa. And that I'm seeing her more than I'm seeing Charles's sister. I almost wish that they had brought in a up and coming comedian to end up in this role.
I think the biggest issue I have right now, at least when it comes to Charles's sister in general, like just the idea that Charles has a sister. We've never heard about her really before.
Nope.
Like she hasn't been like some big force, and it's not like we've never heard anything about Charles's past. Like
Mhm.
he brings up Brazos all the time. We've
Yep.
heard about
His
Charles's
dad.
dad, yeah, and so it's like we have a little bit of backstory on him. So where does his sister fit in, and how close are they really if he's never brought her up before? Because this is not the first time the trio has been in danger either.
Yeah, like my guess from what we saw in the trailers that she is just a much larger personality, that she's a little bit out there with the dolls and everything that's going on, that maybe her and Charles just don't have a very close relationship because of that, because Charles is very much to himself. And from the little that we've seen of her in the trailer, she seems like she's a bit more social than him.
Yeah, and at the end of this episode, this week's episode, we see the trio go away, but at the time in which they're leaving, it doesn't actually feel like they have that clear a sense as to where they are going. I kind of feel
Yeah.
like they're going to be in the car together, just sort of brainstorming ideas, and then maybe they'll be like, "Well, Mabel, do you have any family you could go to?" And she may be like, "Oh, maybe not is the best time right now." And then Charles is going to eventually be like, "Oh, yeah, well, I have a sister." And they're going to be like, "You have a sister?" Like he's never even brought her up to them.
Yeah, so here's the synopsis of what we know going into this next
Yeah.
episode. Terrified by a threat inside the Arconia, the trio race out of the city.
Hmm.
A member of Charles's family provides refuge, and yet the safe house proves to be anything but. So is it then that we're going to have whoever is I'm watching you,
Yeah.
watching them continuously, following them out of the city, or is Charles's sister going to just be a problem on her own?
I think, can we have a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B? Because I'm
Mm.
I'm assuming that Charles' sister is going to be a problem on her own. I don't necessarily think that, oh, Charles' sister is involved in what happened to Saz or anything like that. I think that we're meeting her way too late in the season for me to at least be content with the idea that she's some sort of suspect. But I think she's going to be probably overbearing, probably very, very difficult, and I also think that if somebody went through all of the effort to plant hidden cameras in the trio's apartments and then also in Dudenoff's apartment,
Hmm.
they're probably going to have a certain familiarity with what the trio may drive around in. Like we've seen this car before. This is not the first time this car has ever surfaced on the show, and
Hmm.
that they're probably going to have some sort of tracker at least on it too. And they took off so fast at the end of this past episode. Nobody was like, "Hey, let's check the car for any bugs."
No, there's probably some sort of tracker on there. I would be surprised if not. Otherwise,
Yeah.
how does this trio ever leave Charles's sister's house? Like, if
Yeah.
they think that they're in danger and they think that this is a place that they can hide out, and it is a place that
Yeah.
they can hide out, then why would they ever leave there to go out of there? So they would never go back to the Arconia. They'd just be hiding out until
Yeah.
everything is wrapped up, and that would be the rest of the season.
Yeah.
So we need to see either the killer or somebody associated with the killer that is following them out there or making them feel threatened out there, where they get more messages where it's like, I know you're at your sister's house. And then it's just like, okay, well, we can't stay here.
I'm going to try to connect some dots here, and this is going to be very, very difficult. Like, this case is already really difficult. Like, we went into this in the review of how many different, like, complicated threads there are at this point. But the struggle I have entering this episode in particular is, okay, so we're leaving the Arconia behind for the trio. How
Yeah.
are they going to actually be able to do any investigating if they're not at the Arconia? It goes back to me the idea that, okay, they are going to eventually find some sort of tracker on the car, because what's going to happen, they're going to go to Melissa McCarthy. She's going to drive them crazy. They're probably going to be looking for something to do, so they're probably going to be like standing around the car trying to like fiddle around, see if they can find something. They're going to find a tracker on that, and then they're going to call up Detective Williams, and they're going to be, "Hey, Detective Williams, we found this. Can you give us some more information? Maybe where it was purchased, the model." And then she's going to do some of her magic. And then through all of this, they may be able to figure out by some measure either who got the tracker, when the tracker was purchased or planted, or something like that, that it can at least start to narrow down a little bit of the window.
Maybe they might want to tell her that the killer has sent them a text, because that's something from
Yes.
episode 1 that is still sitting out there this season,
Yeah.
that the killer actually wrote them and was like, I'm not your friend. And then these, threats come into them, and they still haven't said anything to
Yeah.
Detective Williams that somebody connected to Saz's death is contacting them. But they're going to call in about, the two left shoulders. Would they call in about the tracker? That makes
Yeah.
sense. maybe tell her about the phone, because it feels like the phone is the key to the kingdom.
Yeah, like I know this may come as a surprise to everyone. I'm not an expert in forensics. I don't know how a lot of things work in the greater tech universe, but is there a way that Detective Williams or some like higher up person, can you get Roddy Ho to come over from Slow Horses to
Yeah,
help with this?
Roddy.
Can somebody figure out the location in which the texts from Saz's phone were sent? Like, is there a way to just sort of figure out, okay, these texts were actually submitted from within the Arconia? Because if that's the case, and they are sending this message that is tied back seemingly to season one with the appearance of the I'm watching you and everything we talked about in the review, does that then basically cement that, okay, this is a Howard, this is a Jan, this is somebody who has just been around the show for the entire time?
Yeah, it's all this season is very hard to figure out what's
Yeah,
going on. I know that since Melissa McCarthy came out in the trailers that there are people that are already suspicious of her.
yeah,
And typically the formula with this show is that whoever is the killer
yeah,
is shown very, very, very early on, and then they kind of disappear for a while, and then episode 6, 7, 8, they're more of a bigger presence.
yeah.
We haven't seen Melissa McCarthy yet. However, this season has kind of so far broken the formula. Unless it turns out that it's Scott Bakula, like they're breaking the formula a bit
Yeah.
here. So it is possible then that we meet up with Charles's sister and she actually ends up also being the killer. Like, just because we haven't seen
Yeah.
her doesn't mean that her and Charles don't have a closer relationship and that maybe she has been around the building more. We have to remember that it was only season 1 that like Charles and Oliver and Mabel all started really being in each other's lives on a really regular basis and spending time together. Charles's sister could have been there a bunch of times, or, he could have gone to see her sometimes.
If I'm trying to think of a motive as to why Charles's sister would do this, even though we haven't met her yet, like I would go back to the idea that Charles was about to sign over the life rights
Right.
at the time in which, the attempt on his life, if he was even the target, happened. Like maybe she knew that there was something in the past that could be very, very bad for her if it ever got out. So she was trying to make sure that, the life rights were never secured. But the problem with this theory is, of course, that Melissa McCarthy would have to know more about a movie being made at that point than Charles did, which is a little it's tricky given that Charles would be the actual basis of the movie.
Right. Unless the producers reached out to her to get information from her and maybe she just didn't tell them. We don't know how close their relationship is. That's
Yeah.
kind of the problem with this at this point, because she's just kind of come out of nowhere. Oh, Charles has his sister.
Yeah.
Okay.
It really does feel right now, for better or worse, that this is them trying to just get Melissa McCarthy on the show. And it might end up being really, really fun. The most important thing for me is that we at least get a couple more clues in this episode to further things. We only have 4 more episodes left this season.
Yeah, like unless Charles's sister is actually bringing something to the table that connects this case, why didn't they just go to Oliver's son, who's just like poof, like he doesn't exist anymore? Like, where is he?
He's on the island of missing only birders in the building characters.
With Teddy and Theo?
Teddy and Theo are there. Oliver's son is there. Lucy is also there, where there was a million different
Yeah.
Lucy's mother theories that were out there for a long time that have just gone completely nowhere.
This would have been a great time also to maybe bring in Cookie.
Yes.
Like, Cookie has been mentioned throughout the seasons as someone that Charles was with, and then Saz took Cookie away from him and had a relationship with Cookie as well. Cookie is out in the ether. Like, it is just really interesting that they decided to bring in a character that hasn't really been mentioned before when there are so many other places that they could have gone. So I feel like Charles's sister has to have some sort of information or some kind of clue.
Please. Only murders in the building. Please, just give us something substantial in this so that we can lose our minds, just like we're losing our minds trying to piece everything together right now.
Yeah, this has been a wonderfully complicated season, and it's been a lot of fun to cover so far.
Yeah, that is our preview for episode 7. But as you guys know, we do 3 Only Murders in the Building videos a week. We have our review up for episode 6 tomorrow. We will have our big theory discussion about Glenn Stubbins, who for right now is at the top of my murder board. I'm not saying I am like 100% confident in this. I am not, but there is a lot of interesting smoke around this guy. So stay tuned for that. Hit that subscribe button. Help us to get to 67,000. And if you want to support us more, join our Patreon. We have a link in the description, exclusive coverage of the Penguin there.
Yep.
Thank you so much to our patrons. We'll see you here
Thank you.
next time.